Okay. It has been around since 3000 BC. From ancient China to American colonization, mankind has been using it, growing it. But for the past several decades, it was criminalized, halting all medical research on it. I'm, of course, talking about cannabis, or as it's more commonly known, marijuana. Now, it is classified as a Schedule I drug, making medical research on it more difficult to perform. And people can and do keep getting thrown in jail for possessing even a small amount of it, all due to a misunderstanding of its effects. But recently, it has been making a comeback. I mean, half the states have legalized medical use for it, and just last year, 2 states, Colorado and Washington, have legalized its recreational use. So that brings me to my main claim that marijuana legalization, both recreational and medical, would be beneficial to the country. I'm going to prove this by proving that there is, 1, no reason for it to be criminalized in the first place, 2, that it has many medical benefits, and 3, it will be beneficial to the economy. First off, it shouldn't be criminalized because one thing is that alcohol and cigarettes are much more deadly, and yet they are perfectly legal. An article from the New York Times, for instance, mentioned that an independent scientific committee in Britain compared 20 drugs in 2010 for the harms they cause to individual users and to society as a whole through crime, family breakdown, all that stuff. Adding up all the damage, the panel estimated that alcohol was the most harmful drug, followed by heroin and crack cocaine. Marijuana was ranked 8th, having slightly more than 1/4 the harm of alcohol. And the downsides of marijuana, any of them, pale in comparison to liver disease and lung cancer that alcohol and tobacco products cause respectively. And unlike other Schedule I drugs, marijuana is not highly addictive. Philip M. Boffey notes in an article that marijuana isn't addictive in the same sense as heroin, from which withdrawal is an agonizing physical ordeal, but it can interact with pleasure centers in the brain and can create a strong sense of psychological dependence that can be difficult to break. But when they try to stop, they get withdrawal symptoms such as irritability, sleeping difficulties, and anxiety that are usually described as relatively mild. In short, it's sort of like caffeine, another drug that is perfectly legal. And of course, some have said it's a gateway drug. It isn't. There has been a study, the Institute of Medicine study found that while 111 million Americans have tried marijuana, only 1/3 of that number have tried cocaine and only 4% heroin. People who try marijuana are more likely than the general population to try other drugs, but that doesn't mean marijuana prompted them to do so. Marijuana does not appear to be a gateway drug to the extent that it is the cause, or even that it is the most significant predictor of serious drug abuse. That's what the Institute of Medicine said. What they say is actually the real gateway drugs are most likely tobacco and alcohol, which young people turn to first. But now that I've proven that it shouldn't be criminalized and that it has no harm, now here are the benefits. Now there is not a lot of research on it because medical research of Schedule I drugs is heavily restricted. Scientists need to get approval from the Drug Enforcement Agency and the FDA to do research on medical marijuana. But even though the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy does believe that for certain medical conditions and symptoms, it can be helpful. This, once again, from a Schedule I drug, which specifically says no medical uses can come from it. And the amount of research medical marijuana does have is that it can help with epilepsy and people with AIDS. For the epilepsy, CBD oil, which is marijuana without the high, has been shown to significantly reduce seizures. For instance, in a National Geographic article. There was a girl named Adeline Patrick, or Addie, who did have severe seizures since she was a baby. And even though the prescription drugs helped with them, they have really, her behavior declined. It put her to sleep for almost an entire day, almost like a coma. Then her parents tried CBD oil, and not only did the seizures stop, but there was a significant improvement in her behavior. Like she was more upbeat, and ever since taking the CBD oil, Addie hasn't been hospitalized once. And medical marijuana is illegal in over half the states. Anyways, other times, like for people with AIDS, it doesn't really help with the disease, but helps with the effects of the disease. Like, for instance, it can help increase appetite and treat weight loss. An extract that has been approved in Europe and Canada can relieve pain and muscle spasms for people with multiple sclerosis, although it has yet to be approved in the U.S. In another study by Dr. Manuel Guzman, a biochemist who has studied marijuana for about 20 years, gave rats brain cancer and treated them with THC for a week. In a third of the rats, the tumor size reduced, and in another third, the tumor was eradicated. Of course, as Guzman says, rats are not humans. We do not know if this can be extrapolated to humans at all. However, this only increases the need to research marijuana to see what it can do. And finally, my third point is that it's a great source of tax revenue. Of course, all of you have heard of the Colorado legalizing marijuana just last year. So, but according to the Washington Post analysis of the tax data from the state's Department of Revenue, Colorado pulled in over $700 million in marijuana and marijuana-related sales for just 1 year. And not only that, but as you should know, enforcement on marijuana prohibition is not cheap. So according to Jeffrey Myron, in fact, an economist from Harvard University, approximately $8.7 billion a year of the savings would result from legalization of marijuana. He also goes on to state that another $8.7 billion will be generated from taxes on marijuana. Once again, that's per year. And also, there is a perfectly fine system for regulations that it can be integrated into, just like cigarettes and alcohol. Regulating cannabis can work just like that. Right now in Colorado, it has a similar system, such as you need to be 21 and older, you can only purchase a certain amount, and that drug-impaired driving is prohibited if the THC levels are greater than a certain number. And Washington shares a very similar stories with almost identical rules and regulations. So even though it has only been a year, the results don't lie. Legalization can thrive in the economy, and it can work. So in conclusion, marijuana should not be a Schedule I drug. It should be legalized as medical uses and recreational use. And I hope you agree too. Thank you.
All right, Alex, the proposition's clearly identified, although at the end of the speech it turns into a policy proposition on 2 points, and I think that that's a bit problematic. There is a good preview of what the secondary structure is going to be. In the body of the speech, you signpost those pretty well. You usually give good explanations. I think on the first point, your argument is a little problematic because it talks mostly about how other things are more dangerous than marijuana, but doesn't talk about whatever risks there might be associated with marijuana. And if we have regulations and rules in place for people who are legally using marijuana, then there must be some reason for those sorts of things. So I think you want to be careful about saying that it's got no risk. I think you want to put it in the context of relative risk. I think that would be the stronger argument to make. On the medical research being restricted, I like that. I think that that might be the place where you could make a bigger argument. It sounds like there's research that's being done in Europe, and I swear I just heard that story about the girl with the epilepsy earlier today. You know, so yeah, I'm not even sure if it's a different girl, but even if it is, it's still the same issue, and that is that we're relying on a single example in order to make this inference. Now, I think the argument that says that we can't have anything other than those examples because of the restrictions, I think that would be a compelling argument on this particular point. The revenue generating issue, I think you're dependent on the example of Colorado. We know how much they sold. I didn't hear how much they brought in Colorado in terms of taxes. I'm sure they got some money there. And then you've got the quote at the end that says it estimates it to be $8 billion in tax revenues returned. The $8 billion in savings would need to be explained a little bit more. I assume that they're talking about law enforcement kinds of issues, but I'm not sure how the $8 billion was calculated out, and I think that that would be an argument that needs to be developed a bit more as well. All right, and by the way, it's more than 9 minutes.